Well, cool, Jeff. Well, thanks for hopping on here. I was interested to hear more about what you've got going on with Divorced Daddy. And may start with the first question is like, how do I say your last name?
Kolesnikovich.
Okay, one more time. It's Kolesnikovich.
Yes, you got it, actually. Kolesnikovich.
Okay, cool. We'll just start at the top. I was going through your webpage. It's helping me like give me a pause because I was married for about 10 years and now divorced about 14, and I think it's still very much alive in me, and who I am and how I who I am to myself and in relationship or prospective relationship. And I haven't remarried and I'm not in a committed relationship right now, but I feel like that's what I'd like to be able to do. And so maybe I'll get some blind spots revealed in our conversation here. And it's been also a journey with my kids who were I think 7 and 8 when we divorced. So that was I had a lot of pain and a lot of shame and a lot of experience of failure and a lot of and I'm sure I've heard divorce is a number of things. But I don't know that I'd heard divorce as war as a descriptor, and immediately, like intuitively, it's validating. It feels validating on a number of different fronts, like war inside myself, and then war between myself and maybe my ex or the family or culture. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think you nailed it with your first point. It is a war with yourself. And I don't think it's a war with your ex. I don't think it's a war with the courts or anything else. And I think a lot of men get caught up in that war and they go through divorce court and they have everything taken from them. I left my relationship with, and I it's not much of an exaggeration to say I left with the clothes on my back and a new bill to pay every month. It's not about money so much as it is about losing everything you worked for. You lose your house. That's where you feel safe. That's what you built for your loved ones, and it just gets taken away from you. So it's easy to feel it, and then on top of that, to have a new bill payment hampers your ability to rebuild your life, because all of a sudden you've got, $1,000, $2,000 a month in child support or alimony, and you have to buy a new house and find a place to live and buy all the stuff that is necessary to live: a couch, a knife set, all of that stuff. So the war isn't with your ex. It might seem like it is, but I think it's the war with yourself to not give up. One of the early lines I wrote was, "Don't let the darkness win." And it's so easy when you have everything taken away and you're painted as a villain. And so often you get painted that way so someone else can take a little bit more money from you or win that argument, whatever it is. It's easy to feel that way, and you feel like you're a victim of those circumstances. But you have a choice. Either you lay down and die, or you keep fighting. So that war is to get out of bed every day, no matter how bad you feel, and try to be better than you were the day before.
As you were saying that, I was seeing, internally, as I got up, and God, those early days of getting out of bed, that was no joke. Like, why? I'd part of me that looked back and remembered the day while I was engaged, that I had this serious question for myself, like, what am I doing? I've gotten into this too quickly. This isn't the right situation. This isn't going to be the right marriage. But these big forces are moving forward to developing, planning the wedding and planning the honeymoon and planning this life together. And I can't stop that. So I stuck my staff in the ground. Like, all right, I'm doing this. This is what all guys must do. There must always be a question. And she's going to be a fantastic mother. She's an amazing person. And so some of these internal thoughts or fears must just be like anxiety beforehand. So I stuffed them. Now, 10 years later, all of those things come back up. And then I feel like I've been out of integrity. I didn't listen to those thoughts. Like, I'm not now a man that's worthy of raising my kids. And so I had that narrative of like, well, of course this thing ended in divorce, because I saw that coming and I just wasn't enough of a man to stick to my guns. Like, this is what I want for my life. And that story was competing with the one that's like, this is an amazing woman, but we don't connect on some of these fundamental ways. And I'm glad that I did wake up to that, and that I'm actually honoring who I am and who she is by ending this now and demonstrating for my kids that we have to stand up and we have to make hard decisions in our life. And actually, I felt like I was being the man that I wanted to be for my kids, and giving them this unique and really painful experience, while at the same time thinking that they would be better off without having any exposure to me, because there was something in me that was toxic.
Where did that feeling of toxicity come from? Was it in there before you got divorced or after?
I think it became most acute in the course of the marriage, where it was scramble mode, like baby one, baby two, and then how am I going to support these kids and my wife and make the money and design a career, just going full speed ahead. And in that full speed ahead, it became 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 8 years, 9 years of full speed ahead. And what I had done was taken some of the things that had been near and dear to me and just put them on the shelf, and living the consequence of some of the things that brought me the most joy and brought me the most peace, and actually reminded me of who it was. Basically what I did is I woke up not knowing who I was 8 years, 10 years later, and that I'd felt, fraudulent, because then one of the things I had most looked forward to my entire life was being a dad, was having kids. Even as a little kid, I loved kids. I loved other, little kids, like ones younger than me. And so I always looked forward. It was something I never questioned. It's like, I'm going to, so much love being a dad. And one of the hardest parts was that I was going so fast during their child years that even when I spent time with them, I didn't feel like I had built a life where I could really drop in and relax. And that was one of the things that I realized that later on towards the end of the marriage is like, I need to rearrange my life in such a way that I can actually return to the person that I wanted to be when I was growing up, the man that I wanted to be, and that I didn't see how I could do that in the marriage container that I had built. So I guess to answer your question, that some of that, that shame or toxicity was developing, in that mad dash to build the life with the house and the cars and the stability. And in the building of stability, I built this great instability of inauthenticity.
You showed a lot of self-awareness there. I think the journey you described, that's pretty common for a lot of men. We go off into career battle mode, and we have somebody join us, and we choose to stuff down our emotions in order to get further ahead in life, because I think that's what we expect of ourselves and other people expect of us. It's this feeling of shame that their marriage ended. And I don't necessarily believe, and I have to be careful here, I don't necessarily believe that it's a failure on either side. 50% of marriages fail. Of second marriages, 60% fail. And of third marriages, 70% fail. And 70% of divorces are initiated by women. And that's not to pit men against women here, but we aren't the ones ending marriages for the most part. And I've heard it referred to as career battle mode, where we're stuffing down our emotions and we're just trying to power through that crappy feeling of waking up for work, commuting an hour, sitting in a cubicle, commuting home an hour. And I think over time that builds up, and we disconnect from our partner and, more importantly, ourselves. That disconnection is going to build up over time, and one day it's just going to explode. So just about everybody goes through what I call the baseball bat at about in their mid-30s. There's some sort of crisis that happens in their mid-30s. For me, it was my divorce. For a friend of mine, it was his health. Mid-30s seems to be an area of that baseball bat coming. And that's just life bringing your attention to some area of life that they've been ignoring. So I believe there's 8 areas of life, and I'm going to list them off here. There's family, career, mental, environmental, financial, social, physical, and spiritual. First of all, I believe the goal of life is to level all of those areas up as high as you can get them. There's a game here, though. If you level up your financial, one of the other areas of life will suffer. And I think in your mid-30s, this is the magic of life. Life has this way of bringing your attention to that area of life you've been ignoring. So if you put all your energy into your career and you've been ignoring your physical health, guess what's going to hit you in your mid-30s? And you can choose to ignore that, or you can bring your attention to that. I know all kinds of people who ignore it and they just push through it, and they take pills for some health crisis, and it's 10 years later and those people aren't healthy. Or you can listen to what life's telling you and bring your attention to that. In my case, my baseball bat was my marriage, and thank God it was that. It would have been awful to have some sort of bigger crisis happen. So I'm so grateful that I had this divorce, because I got another chance to examine where my shortcomings were and improve that. So I think that idea of shame is incredibly powerful, because you have this loss. Rather than looking at it as a loss, start to look at it as, what is the gold inside of this? What am I not paying attention to? How can I make myself better? How do I improve my life from this? What is life telling me here? I'm having a divorce. My I don't know, say my ex-wife had an affair. What does that say about me? And start looking at yourself in terms.
That moment was, yeah. I got I got solidly smacked by it for sure. And I remember, and I'm glad that I have this thing as numb as I think as I was to so many things in life. Because I was just skipping. I felt like I was going so fast, just skipping over them like a skipping rock. I didn't have time to stop and then sink down into the water of my life and actually look around. But I do remember that moment where there was a switch inside me that now it's time to stop and pivot. And it had to be an embodied knowing, because had it just been an understanding, I wouldn't have had the balls or the spine to turn and face the size of the fire that was going to come when you walk into that divorce, or when I walked into that divorce and kids. And like I needed to have, I like that you're putting that in the context of it's actually a thing that happens in life. It reoriented me like on a deep integrity level.
Well, I think that gets rid of the shame. You didn't fail. It brought your attention to something. If you got a question wrong on a math test, did you fail? No, you didn't know that concept, and you can correct it for next time. It's just sometimes these baseball bat moments are bigger. Some are bigger than others. But yeah. I would also argue that there were little moments along the way that you ignored. And I think you said this earlier. You ignore it. And then life throws something at you that's so big that you can't ignore it anymore.
Right.
Or you can try, but let's see what happens after that.
Funny, there's another person in our group that she has these, I think she calls them like four core emotions. Like there's anger and fear and sadness and joy. And I've been playing with those concepts. Like in any interaction, I can stop and I can find like, where's my anger? Where's my fear right now? And of course there's fear here. And then where's my sadness? Yes, there's sadness here. And there's joy. And there's all four of those are like right alive right now. And what just came up to me was I had taken my joy and put it on the shelf. And in the chaos of living, for all those years in anger and sadness and fear, the joy, a little bit of joy, but actually looking at joy as actually one of the main drivers in my life that I've just, the image I'm getting now is it was up, I had put it up on a shelf, and in the chaos, I was just sort of shaking the whole foundation of my house. And that joy jar just kept like scooting off the shelf until that one day it just fell and knocked on my head. And I had, in my case, I went and took an improv workshop for the weekend, and I'd had such a past life of mine, in my 20s, it was very much devoted to being in the theater, in this improv based group, and all my deepest, a lot of my me knowing who I was wrapped up in that. And I had in that experience playing in that kind of container, and I had taken all of that and put it on the side because I had to, make the money and have the house, and finally the joy had been, maybe I wouldn't ever experience that much joy, but there would be a long-term joy with the kids and the marriage, and life basically came back, and the bat was basically this joy bomb. It's like, look at what you're designed to experience, that you can't actually feel whole until you have a regular ritual, maybe weekly, maybe daily, maybe monthly, but ritual where I can actually experience the joy that I'm designed to experience, not living there as an escape, but having that one of my four that I'm not going to use that to escape the anger or the fear or the sadness. But if I don't actually allow myself to feel the joy that I'm designed to feel, like I'm inauthentic. And anyway, this is just coming to me now, is that was part of the bat that I got hit with, and there was a deep sadness that I realized that I had decided to live in for the rest of my life. That my body is like, nope, we're not agreeing to that.
Your body, no, we're not living in what? In joy?
So, well, what I had decided was that the joy that I had been getting from playing with people in that theatrical container, that actually fed me in a way that nothing else did. And it didn't need to be in the theater, but it needed to be with people that were playful and curious and engaged with each other in that sort of way, was freeing for me, and with whatever it is that I am in this thing, there was a level of freedom that was really like coming up for air. And I had taken all of that, and I was trying to get all of the joy needs from my wife, from my marriage, from my kids, from the job and the house. And it was kind of fascist of me to expect them to feed me in a way that they're not designed. So when I actually found myself in that experience with those people, and the joy came back, and just as bright as it had been 10 years prior when I had put it aside, the only thing I could do was reorganize my life in a way that felt more balancing of all of those.
It sounds like you were outsourcing your emotions.
You mean to the you mean to the family or the job? Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe that's one of the opportunities that exist within a divorce, is you get to take control of your emotions. You get to have emotional self-regulation. I think so many of us just don't even know what these emotions are. So I came from an engineering background, and I think I went into engineering because it was so logical, software engineering to be specific. And it was almost a retreat from having to experience this messy world with emotions. And you could retreat into code and just making pieces work together. I don't know how common that is, but I think within the software development community, I think that's a fairly common story. But I don't think, for me anyway, that it was very healthy. I never processed any emotions, and I didn't know what I was even feeling inside of myself. So those four emotions you talked about, I know I would have like these pangs of fear, but I would just push it down. Now I know it's much better and I have techniques on releasing those emotions and feeling it. And you realize that emotions just pass over like clouds in the sky. But at the time, I didn't know when they were appropriate to release and who to direct them at. So I would push them down, and often they would come out at inopportune times. I remember feeling anger, and because somebody told me I shouldn't park my car in a certain spot, and I remember yelling at them, and then I felt happy that I had an emotion. And that was just this moment of starting to slowly wake up and realize that, maybe I shouldn't be yelling at the guy telling me not to park in the no parking spot. But having that divorce is all emotion. It's an argument with your ex that's just escalated to the point of needing a third party to moderate it. It's all this emotion of, she's taking the house and I take the dog. No, she wants the dog and the house. And, and that just becomes this. It's so easy to get wrapped up in that emotion. And rather than, sometimes it's just not worth it. let her have the house, go take that energy, direct it into something else, and you can buy a better house.
That seems to be really worthy of like pausing on for a second, just with what you were saying, like when there's that much emotion moving, not knowing, like, having a software engineer career where you're just moving things around and it's very meditative. It's that kind of huge space where emotion doesn't come through. Like it's almost like this never ending tropical day. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But there's, like the tropical storms of emotion don't necessarily come through. And then when they do, especially if there's no knowledge of how emotion moves through this thing that I am. And so then it would just be intuitively make sense to shove it down, intuitively or logically, just to like, nope, back you go. So it sounds like it's part of your own movement through from divorce through, it's like there was emotion and they were just, they're destructive. And then looking at divorce as this just big emotional explosion, maybe. How the heck did you move from not knowing what to do with emotion to where you are now, where now you've got a model, a map, and a compass to deal with these things called emotions?
First of all, I started working with a coach. I remember feeling absolutely awful as I was going through the divorce, but I had no idea how to feel better. So I started working with a coach who started teaching me how to deal with emotions. And I'll give you the secret. An emotion is a fear that we are not worthy of being loved. And that can express itself in a number of ways. So an emotion is worrying about the future or beating yourself up over the past. The past, when you look at the past, that's depression. I didn't do this well enough, so I deserve what I got. And the future is anxiety and what's going to happen, what's going to happen, what's going to happen. And then you're constantly focused there. So what my coach did, she taught me to learn to focus on future doesn't exist. The past has already happened. All you have is right now. Now, that's one of those things that's easier said than done. So there's a lot of work that you can do around emotions. And I've done so much of it. Learn to find an emotion. You're feeling emotion over something because like I said earlier, you're feeling emotion about something. An emotion comes about as why am I struggling with this?
It's good though.
Let me start that again. We have emotions, and I think they're much better if you use them as feedback and use them as feedback about how you're moving through the world. So in the example you gave earlier, you're going to work, you're married to somebody who could be a very lovely person, but you still feel really bad about being with her, for instance. And if you're having emotions around these things, those emotions are feedback that you're not in line with your integrity. And integrity means who you are. There's a bunch of different ways to say it depending on what you believe. I call it your higher self. And I think the trap a lot of men fall into is they stuff that down. Like you already said, we stuff it down. We try to get through our day. We're out in career battle mode. We're fighting. We're trying to stay alive, keep our head above water. So we got to stuff those emotions down. But if we shift it to listening to that feedback, then we can guide ourselves through our day a lot better with a lot more wisdom. So if we don't want to wake up in the morning and go to that job, maybe it's time for a new job. But if you can look for the gift inside of what you went through, a big part of what the work I do is there is an equal amount of good and bad in anything. And if you think of the yin and yang, actually I have one right here. There's an equal amount of good and bad in anything. And that's what makes whatever it is. A lot of people only see the darkness, and guess what there is? Darkness. Some people, and this is resentment, and this is infatuation. You only see the good. But in reality, it's this.
Yep.
So if you only see your divorce as this, you're going to get stuck here because you're going to be looking at that and like, screw my ex-wife. She's a miserable piece of crap. And the system is rigged against me. But I will stake my life on this, that divorce is actually this.
Hmm.
So if you see it as this, you need to look for this and then put them together. This is called gratitude. Find that gratitude for the divorce you went through.
For me, like a major deterrent to actually trying to bring myself out into the world in my next iteration after my divorce. Like, I know now that I know what I'm capable of, if I'm capable of breaking, of cheating, and knowing the destruction that I can tell the story, that destruction that might bring. I've recognized there's probably some confusion in that narrative. I might not be willing to actually look at it and feel it. And I know that you've given me some good advice in helping to clear up my own thought process around who, if any person deserves the brunt of the responsibility in any kind of interaction. And I was tending to take too much on my own. And I could see that. Does that make sense?
No, it does. I don't believe that either party, and I have to be careful with my words here, I don't believe either party deserves the brunt of something. So what I say is that darkness lives where there's no meaning.
Mm.
And if you can find meaning, then that gets rid of not all of the, but that gets rid of the suffering. And it doesn't matter, like as Viktor Frankl showed, the atrocity can be horrible, but find meaning in it and you can survive it.
That reminds me of, I know Teal Swan, I don't know if you know her, but she's talked about, I can't speak for her, it's been a while since I've heard her say this, but she talks about the role of men, or the man in a relationship, is actually providing the container. And so that was what I was seeing when you were talking about the daddy energy, like a container being like, what's happening on such an embodied level around you at all times. Like you've got a handle on it. And so it's safe. And so you're just free to play. You're free to play with your language and your love and your affection and knock the shit out of your kids or your buddies, and lean over and like have an affectionate pat on the ass or whatever it is that is your banter with your partner. Right? You're free to play in that because everything is actually under control and handled.
Yeah. You're creating that umbrella of safety.
Quality of the moments.
Quality moments, yeah. And that legacy can come in all sorts of. Hedonism is when you're only focused on yourself. And I think if you're focused on hedonism, that's when you become scared of dying. If you're giving and you've done your best to give yourself to other people and served other people and served your purpose, you've lived your purpose. There's no fear. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then maybe you have the question, well, do I live again? Are there multiple lifetimes? I don't know. Or am I going somewhere after death? The Egyptians have a hieroglyph where they show the process of going into the afterlife. And I don't remember all the names of the gods, so pardon me, but there is a god who weighs your heart against a feather. And if your heart is lighter than a feather, meaning you're not carrying grief with you and you've lived your purpose, then you can go into the afterlife. I mean, that makes it really clear right there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you. Thanks for chatting. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great.